That's where the mental toughness comes in, right? I mean, there are days where you just don't feel like doing it, right? But the problem is, that's contagious, just like, energy is contagious, positive energy is contagious, right?
Yes.
If you come out there lollygagging and God forbid you're one of the leaders on the team and you're having a day like that and you're not going to overcome it mentally, guess what the guys that are looking up to you are going to be doing, right? They're going to follow suit in a heartbeat.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to another live episode of Masters of the Game. So excited today to be connected with Mr. Mitch Lyons. Mitch, welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate you having me, Matt. Glad to be here.
This is awesome. And small world, because a couple of weeks ago, I had JJ Burden on the interview series. And as of recording this, that JJ's is actually not out yet, but will be very soon. But talking to Mitch, you actually played with JJ for a couple of years, I think it was, right?
Yeah, we played in Atlanta together. Yeah.
It's so awesome. But, go check the bio. I'll put all the information about Mitch, but just kind of quick background, Michigan guy, meaning he grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. You got to be really careful when you say the Michigan guy thing. He attended Michigan State University, okay, just to be very, very clear. Sorry, Michigan fans.
Yeah.
But and then had the opportunity to go play tight end in the NFL. He played 7 total seasons, 4 with the Falcons and 3 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He now, and we're going to dive into his background, all that sort of stuff, but now he's a host of the Lions Share podcast, runs his own wealth management practice, just awesome stuff as well. But, Mitch, the first kind of question I had that I always like to ask all my guests is, when you look back at your football career, what's one or two of just the greatest memories you've had from your playing days?
I would say collegiately, we went to a few bowl games, but really the game that sticks out in my mind is my sophomore year. We went down to Michigan. They were ranked number 1. We weren't starting that year off very well. It was 1990, and I think we had started off 1-2-1. And we went down to play Michigan. They were ranked number 1, and we ended up beating them on the last play of the game and stunned the 100,000 big house. And so that was pretty cool. Pro-wise, there were some fantastic finishes. I mean, I made a couple appearances in the playoffs. Never got to the big dance, but I guess looking back on pro career, really it's just the Steelers Ravens matchups were always a war. Just kind of mano a mano and just go and battle for playing to the whistle and for 60 minutes. Those games are always a war between those two teams. So that kind of sticks out in my mind as well.
That's awesome. Well, so I saw a post today on LinkedIn you did. I don't know if it was today or a week ago, who knows. But it was around how you were actually tossed out of a game, fined $5,000 at the time.
Yeah.
And it goes kind of to your point of like the Ravens, Pittsburgh kind of battles and stuff like that, right? You're playing obviously an extremely physical game. You're a big guy, 6'5", and your playing weight was like 260, 265, something like that.
Yeah.
And just the pure force of the game, right? And I won't go into the full story, right? But fine was later taken back. But
it's an emotional game, and I'll just tell real quick. We were that was actually against the Titans, and we were grinding the clock out, pounding Jerome Bettis, the boss, eating up the clock, and we Mark Bruner was the other tight end with Pittsburgh. We just took pride in ourselves always playing to the whistle, right? And Coach Mike Malarkey was our tight end coach, and we always kind of created a little kangaroo court. You get fined for certain things if you had a penalty or if you got a holding, or late to a meeting, whatever. But Mike would kind of throw a few bucks in every time you had your guy to the whistle, or if you got the look. If you gave a little one violent shove at the whistle and then you got the look from the guy like he was going to do something. And if you got a swing from him, it was even more. So we always kept we took pride in that, playing to the whistle, the echo of the whistle, as we'd say. Well, I was doing that, and Joe Bowden was a linebacker for the Titans, and he didn't appreciate that very much. And he got my mask, and I was trying to get out of it. And next thing I know, I'm looking out my ear hole because he's pulling my mask way over here. And I finally just got my head out, and I just came up swinging. And, of course, the ref sees that, and he flags me, and I get kicked out. And about the time I go to the sideline, it suddenly occurred to me, I remembered that was an automatic $5,000 fine, which, for my salary back then, I wasn't digging $5,000. I wasn't, Jerome Bettis. It was lunch money for him. But to me, it meant something. But long story short, later that week, I appealed it and went into Cowher's office, and he was calling Gene Washington, who happens to be a Michigan State guy. He's up on the Ring of Honor in Spartan Stadium. But Gene was the disciplinarian chief, for the NFL. He would dole out the punishments and stuff. And I knew I was in good graces when Bill called him on the speakerphone, and he said, "Hey, Gene, Bill Cowher here." And he goes, "Billy." And I said, "Yeah, all right." He was buddy with Bill. And he goes, "Yeah, we can't really see anything in the TV copy, so we're going to rescind that." And he goes, "Hey," but that was after he said, "Hey, Mitch, Michigan State guy too." Yeah. So he ended up rescinding the fine. So I was happy about that.
So good. So good. Well, and I got to ask, because you play such an emotional game, how did you manage the emotions, right? Again, physicality, emotional. How did you kind of keep those in check where you didn't go overboard or
obviously in that particular instance I didn't, but most of the time I did. So yeah, it is hey, if you're not passionate and emotional in the NFL, you're not going to be there very long because it's just too high speed, too many guys that are, right. So you're going to get found out real quick if you don't bring that kind of energy to the game. And I knew exactly where my bread was buttered. I knew I was there to, block. I had decent hands, but I wasn't going to run anybody in a 100-meter sprint or anything. But I knew what I was there for, and it was to pound people to the whistle and, play with effort, toughness. Always know what I was doing. I was, considered a smart player, if you will. So I had to do those things, right? So it was playing to the whistle. It was, being able to elicit maybe a swing back at me, but not give them, annoy people, be annoying, within the rules. And so
yes,
that's just kind of the way I was raised. It's kind of Michigan State. We had the same toughness level. And that, just kind of followed me into the NFL. And then when I went to Pittsburgh, they had that same mindset, which Coach Perlis had obviously, if you don't know, coached for the Steelers back in the 70s when they were winning 4 Super Bowls. So that I was very familiar with that whole style of play. And that's what Coach Cowher was looking for when I went to Pittsburgh from Atlanta.
So it's interesting to me, I grew up a University of Colorado fan and a football fan, and a number of players back in the day used to be drafted by the Steelers. And I find this really interesting. And
sorry, my light just fell. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. But all the players who were recruited by Pittsburgh, in my mind, they fit the culture of Pittsburgh. Okay. And it was just this gritty, we're going to pound you, play through the whistle, the echo of the whistle. That just the linebackers and cornerbacks that came out of Colorado, right, specifically fit that mentality, and they would usually do really well in Pittsburgh. And you fit that mold as well. Talk to me about the culture there, right, in Pittsburgh, because it is different, right? And every team has their culture. It's not a good or bad, right or wrong. But how did they just set that tone and say, this is what we expect? How is that from a coaching staff?
I think in the case of the Steelers, it goes back to 1969, right? Chuck Noll coming in. They've had 3 head coaches since 1969, which is unbelievable, right? You can't find, I don't know what the next closest is, but it's not close, right? A lot of teams have 3 coaches in 3 years. And, they've had Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin, which is just unbelievable. I had the opportunity to have Coach Cowher on my podcast in the fall, which was fun to catch up with him after 25 years. And, but, obviously they were tough back in the 70s with the Jack Lambert and just, Mean Joe Green and Franco Harris, Rocky Plyer, all those guys. They had that mentality, that aura about them then. And Cowher didn't change that. He always talked about, guys, it's a mindset. It's a mindset, right? Mental toughness. Was big on that, stay the course. And, Tomlin's kind of got that same, and that comes from the ownership, right? Ownership on down. They hired all those guys. It's a culture built on, trust, respect, effort, grit. And, and I, being a Michigan guy now, living back in Michigan, you kind of see that with Dan Campbell and the New Era Lions.
Yes,
they flipped the script on that. They weren't that for a long time, and they unfortunately have gotten knocked out the last couple of years. But they've built a culture there that kind of reminds me of that Steelers feel.
Yes, and when you're actually practicing, during the season. How did that show up? Because I think it's a lot of times it's easy to say, hard to do, right? So we say, oh, we want this culture. And then you look and you're like, yeah, but you're not practicing that way. You're not playing that way. How did you guys maintain that during practice?
It's got to come from the coach, right? He's setting the tone from the beginning of the season on. And then really, then it comes down to your leaders on the team, right? If you've got I'll just talk about some of the guys back then, of course, now I'm Carnell Lake, was a all pro defensive back, but the guy was always in awesome shape and, played every play like it was the most important, whether it was practice or not. He gave that kind of effort, right? So when you see a guy like that playing to the whistle or playing hard, it's really hard to not do that, right? If you're a player that's maybe his backup or another player that's out in the field with him, and you're watching film and Carnell's chasing guys down from 30 yards away on the other side of the field, how are you not doing that, right? So that's a big part of any team, right? You've got to have player-led teams, and same thing on the offensive line, right? If you got one guy that's busting his hump, getting 10 yards downfield, peeling guys off a play, and the other guy's standing back taking pictures, that's a tough film session to watch when your all-pro left tackle's doing that, but maybe the second-year right guard who's maybe starting part-time, if he's not doing that, that's a hard film session to sit through when you see that happening.
That is true. Were they, when you look back at like coaches Atlanta and with the Steelers, were they like, how did they influence? I was like the art of influence, right? Like we're in the art of influence of like motivating our players to play better, right? If you want to call it motivating. How did they like influence you guys? Meaning like, were they yellers? Did they get to know you really well? Was it a combination? Like, how did they kind of coach you?
Yeah, I think, I have had them all over the course of my career, but more so in the pros. I mean, the screaming and yelling and intimidation factor doesn't go over quite as well, right? So now, having said that, I mean, I kind of came from that culture a little bit at Michigan State. I mean, that was a little more old school, let's just say it wasn't my goal to be in Coach Perlis's office at any point. Okay. Because usually if you were, it wasn't for a good reason. Right. So that was a little different. Now I went down to Atlanta, Jerry Glanville drafted me, right? He's about as opposite of George Perlis as you can get, very flamboyant personality. That took a little getting used to. It was fun to a point. When you're winning, it was fun. When you're losing, maybe it's not as much fun. But he was there only that 1 year. June Jones took over the following year. June was very much a non-yeller. Okay, if June was yelling, and you knew something was really going sideways. He was more the consultative guy, trying to talk to you and help you through things. But at the end of the day, you still have to be held accountable. If you're not getting the job done, you're not getting the job done. What have you done for me lately, league, right? And but the thing as far as getting a point across in Atlanta, the guy that always sticks out in my mind is Coach Frank Gans. He was a longtime special teams coach. He actually was a head coach of the Chiefs for a year and a half, something like that in the 80s. But he was a renowned special teams coach, and he started every day with he got a 1 hour meeting, which is unheard of. I mean, everybody in the team had to sit in Frank's meeting, whether you're on special teams or not, right? And he would start every day with a quote, be a historical quote. And you had to take notes, and I still have those notebooks. And he'd give a history lesson, right? But it would always be something that was applicable to what we were trying to accomplish. A lot of stories about war and battles, and he spoke a lot about speaking the same language, right? And a lot of things we talked about, we said repeatedly. It became ingrained in your mind to the fact that I still say them today. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. It's an Aristotle quote, but it was a Frank Gans quote a lot, right? And so some of this stuff's so ingrained in my mind, and that's what he wanted, right? To the point where there was one story he told about an African tribe that when they heard the snap of an arrow, they would duck. And so his testing thing in the meetings would be, if he thought guys are starting nodding off, he'd go. And if your head wasn't down by the time his hand hit the chest, you were dead, right? So because this African tribe knew when they heard the snap of an arrow, they had to duck. And so if things were getting a little, guys are drifting off, he'd give the old, "You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, wake up." He'd be pretty intense. So, but the whole point was we all spoke the same language. And I watched Frank's funeral. This probably was 15 years ago. He passed away, unfortunately, on a surgery table, having a knee replacement. But at his, he was an ex-Navy pilot, and he probably had 25 guys get up and speak at his eulogy and spanning 25, 30 years of coaching, right? Yes. You had guys as old as Morton Anderson, who was, probably 48 at the time, still kicking the NFL, down to his Baylor punter who he had coached his last year coaching. And all telling the same stories, all speaking the same language. And, I sat there with tears going to my face because it was so true, man. We all had that same fabric throughout us of speaking the same language, right? And it just became the culture. That's how you did it. That's what we did. So he was really cool. I respected him a lot.
How long were you coached by him? Was it 3 years in Atlanta?
In Atlanta, yeah. So 3 seasons.
Okay.
Yeah, but he made an indelible impression. Well, well beyond football. It's all lessons I take with me into my career now.
Yes. I mean, that's to your point, an unusual thing, right? To have an hour meeting with a special teams guy that everyone's involved with.
Yep. And a good chunk of it had nothing to do with football, right? I mean, the first 10, 15 minutes was a lesson, right? A lesson that we could apply not only to our season, but, that, again, I'm still applying to my life, 25, 30 years later. So
did it take a big adjustment to get used to those types of things for the team and for you?
Oh, not for me, because I didn't, it wasn't a huge deal for me. Now, some of the veterans that, you had 15 years, 16, I mean, Mike Ken was a longtime lineman who, only he wasn't on any special teams, right? And he kind of butted heads with Frank a little bit about that rule about having to be in there. And there was one time when Frank knew he wasn't in there, but he knew the weight room was through the wall. And I remember, hello, can you hear me? Everyone's supposed to be in here, that kind of thing. Mike finally acquiesced and started attending. But
yes,
but for me, it was fine. I mean, I enjoyed it. And like I said, I mean, he was a great storyteller, a great orator. And, I learned a ton from him.
And you talked about a couple of those quotes that you just rattled off, right? Because they're just running around your head all the time, still to this day. What's one quote that, if you were to tell athletes, remember this one quote, what would you tell them?
Oh, man. Probably, Coach Perlis was the same way. I mean, he didn't say speak the same language, but we all spoke the same language because he'd say the same things, 5 years of Coach Perlis. But, work hard, keep your mouth shut, good things will happen. Right. He always said that. Win, lose, draw, just work hard, keep your mouth shut, good things will happen. And, I didn't barely play my first 3 years, and I redshirted my next 2 years for a variety of factors. Didn't play a whole lot, and I didn't actually start my first game till 4 games into my junior season. Right. And it was sometimes really hard to not run my mouth, right, and chirp, but I just kept working hard. I finally got my opportunity because I felt like I deserved it, like everybody does. Feel like you should be playing sooner than you are, but finally got the opportunity, but didn't drop the ball when I got the opportunity. And I remember, towards the end of that season, he's kind of walking around during Cal's, and I'm on the ground stretching, and he's kind of just standing over me like this and got a smirk on his face. And I just look at him, and he goes, "How'd you get so good?" And I was like, "Finally got the chance, coach." Hey, you finally let me play. So he just kind of chuckled, but he was a great man that had a huge impact on me too. And I'm still, my kids are walking around giving Perlisisms as well because they've heard them from me for years.
That's so good. So let's go back to the transition from high school to college and college to pros. What was the biggest transition for you? Well, tell me a little about kind of your high school career. Were you tight end coming up?
Yeah, I was a tight end. I played linebacker in high school as well, middle linebacker. So it's funny. My high school team was pretty good. We had an unusually large defensive line, right? So I mean, I was a huge linebacker for high school. They had 6'4", 230, right? But my center my nose tackle was. He was probably 6'2", 295. And then next to him were 285 and 280, all big guys, right? We gave up one touchdown my entire senior year against our starting defense. That's because a cornerback slipped on a running play, and the guy got around him. But so that was cool. And the transition from high school to college was, I think, more significant even from college to pro, and I'll get into why. But when you're an 18-year-old kid and then all of a sudden you're competing against a 22 or 23-year-old dude, that's a huge gap, and and especially maybe not in the skill positions as much. I mean, there was a receiver and a DB that played their freshman year. It's a little different though when you're going lining up against a Tony Mandarich or somebody that's been there for 4 years and benching 400 and some pounds and way stronger than I was coming out of high school. Right, that was a huge disadvantage. So you definitely felt like a small fish in a big pond when you first showed up at the D1 level.
That's wild. I don't know what they're feeding you guys up in Grand Rapids, but to have that big a team.
Yeah, it was unusual for sure. It was unusual.
Holy moly. So you go into college, right? And well, let's take a step back even for a minute. Like, was your dream like at an early age that I'm going to go play in the NFL? Like that was the vision, or was it not?
Yeah, I mean, pro sports in general, growing up, right? Baseball, basketball, football, I lived it, man. It was every day, all day. The days when, hey, mom, thanks for breakfast. I'll see you tonight, kind of thing, right? And my dad would literally blow a bugle horn when it was dinner time, right? Because we lived in a kind of a little neighborhood in Belding, Michigan, the bulk of my childhood, early years, formative years, and it was kind of a one road in, one road out kind of thing. So he knew he had to be somewhere. He'd just point that bugle towards the neighborhood, and he'd give us the call to come home for dinner, and we'd come running, my brother and I. But yeah, that was my dream, right? And then as I got older, into high school, I knew that football was my, I played high school basketball, but I knew football was my meal ticket to get a college scholarship. We didn't have a lot of money. I didn't know how I was going to college elsewhere or otherwise. So, that kind of globbed onto that really from 8th, 9th grade on, and worked hard for it.
Yes. Did you naturally? You seem like a hard worker. Was that just something you were born with, or was taught by parents, or like where'd you get it from?
I think a big part of it, in my early days, was the fact that my brother was 4.5 years older than me, right? So he always had a pretty significant size advantage on me. And I would, mom and dad would, hey, Fred, take your brother with you, and I have to. So I'd get stuck playing with guys that are 4 years older than me, right? 4 grades older, or 5 grades in his case. But 4.5 years older, I mean, that's a huge difference. So I was always, I always had to fight for my right, so to speak, even be on the field with them. So I think that started it. And then really, like in 7th grade, I went to Forest Hills Northern in Grand Rapids, and they had a really good coach at the time, and he had a good weightlifting program, and he would incorporate the middle schoolers in, right? So we'd come up, we got out of school an hour later than high school. So high school just about be done wrapping up their weightlifting when we got there. So it was kind of to see some of your heroes, the high school players, lift in, and then, get tutored a little bit by them and the coaches. And so it kind of instilled that work ethic in me early on. And I loved it and saw the gains and knew that would help me. So I just kind of always had that mentality. And I had some teammates that were, Steve Scheffler was a guy that was a couple years older than me. He ended up playing in the NBA for 9 years, but he was a super hard worker, right? So he was a couple of years ahead of me. I was emulating him. We worked out a lot together. I remember pushing Steve's, he was a 6'9" guy driving a rabbit, right? He used to drive a rabbit. So we used to push that rabbit around the parking lot, right? One of us would sit and steer it, and the other guy would push it. And that's how we'd get our leg work out a lot of times. So, it's having guys like that to push you and hold you accountable.
That's amazing. Well, to your point, you set the example, right? There's always those guys out there that are setting the tone, and the tone could be like, I'm going to run down the guy 30 yards across the field, right? Whatever I need to make the play, or push the rabbit around. And then there's other guys who do the opposite.
The bare minimum or nothing, or, become really good at video games. Which
yes.
Apparently now is a thing. You can get a scholarship for it. But back then you weren't, it wasn't going to help you on the field. That's for sure.
That's very true. I think that's important, because we all have those choices. I remember, who was this? I was up at one of the former CU players, and played in the NFL for a long time. I can't remember who it was now. Anyway, he said when he showed up at CU, he picked out this one guy, and he's like, that's the guy I need to emulate.
Yeah.
So not like play like him, but like work like him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find that, it can be a game changer for you. Even if you can only keep up to 50% of that person, that man or woman that you're emulating, like,
yeah,
you're going to be so much better off.
I think, if I could give advice to a young kid today, just going into that, whether it's high school or college, I mean, it's put your ego aside, right? Go pick somebody that's a lot better than you, right? And go compete against that person. And don't worry about the results, right? Just know that it's a journey, it's a process. And if you put that work in and you get your butt, you're going to get your butt whipped a few times, right? More than a few, but you're going to learn from every one. And by the time you're in that guy's shoes, maybe 2-3 years down the road, you're going to be that much better off for it. And, attack your weaknesses. Don't, I look back, and there was times when I feel like I maybe worked around the fact that I wasn't, as fast as I would have liked to have been, right? Versus just attacking it and go and figure out, all right, man, how do I figure out how to get faster, right? And there weren't all the training programs and stuff there are now today. But, I look back and I would say I played around that weakness rather than working directly on it. But now my advice would be like, hey, man, go attack that. Get it as best you can, and then work on your strengths too and get those stronger. But glob onto somebody that's ahead of where you are, right, and learn from them.
So when I talk to, this is business people and athletes, stuff like that, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think one of the, call it the recipe for success, but one of the, ingredients, and I think one of the core ingredients is confidence, right? So to your point, if I'm going to go attack the weakness or go after that someone who's further along than me, I believe it takes like some baseline confidence to go do that, because that is a scary thing to go do that. Because at least for me, I don't want to put myself in a position at least where I am failing over and over again, even though that's the best thing for me, right?
Yeah, that's a hurdle for sure. But you just have to trust, man, from a guy like me telling you, or whoever, because anyone that's ultra successful is all going to say the same thing. You've got to make that leap and trust it. And confidence isn't just given, right? Confidence is earned, and confidence is earned on the practice field. Coach Gans used to say, you earn the right to win on the practice field, right? You're not going to, get these guys, I'm a game player. I rise to the occasion. No, you don't. You never rise to the occasion. You sink to your level of training. Another Frank Gans, right? You don't rise to the occasion. You sink to your level of training. When the bullets start flying, you're going to do what you've always done. You're not going to increase your performance. So that's the importance of, hey, if you're going to play to the whistle on game day and you're going to play to the echo of the whistle, you need to emulate that and replicate that every day in practice, right? If you're going to, chase down a guy, ball thrown 20 yards downfield, and you're going to hustle down and try to get a block downfield in case he breaks the tackle, odds are 9 times out of 10, you're not even going to get there by the time he's tackled, right? Or you're never going to catch up to the player or whatever. But that one time, that's the difference, right? And I always relate this to, I look back at the 2000 or 99, it was 98, 99 Denver Broncos. But when Terrell Davis had like a 2,000-yard season, he had a great line, no question about it. He had a tremendous line, number of all pros, and they were great. And he probably would have been a 1,400-yard rusher anyway if he didn't even have anything besides his line. But he had two of the hardest working wide receivers, Rod Smith and Ed McCaffrey. They would block their tails off, and we'd watch film, and you'd see it. You'd see them busting the versus some guys. I won't name names, but some guys, if they know they're not getting the ball, they take a couple steps and they watch the play, right? And it just infuriates me to no end. The running play's coming their way, and they don't even make an effort to tackle the cornerback, and he's making the tackle. Might be for a 6-yard gain, but he's still making the tackle. Yep. Well, Ed McCaffrey and Rod Smith, they would turn a lot of 6-yard runs into 60-yard runs for Terrell because they'd make that extra effort. They'd get a chip block on the cornerback and then continue on to the next level. So if he made somebody miss or shake and bakes or whatever, they can get the next level. Always working, you get to the next level. And when you get 6, 7 guys on offense, or 8, or if you include the wideouts, you get the line doing that and you get the wideouts. If you get that kind of collective effort, that's where magic happens, right? And everybody starts buying into that, and you're watching film, and it's being celebrated. The line celebrating the wide receivers for their effort, and vice versa. That's when the team as a whole just, right? It's not a linear thing, man. It's like that, when you can get everybody on the same page. I
love that. Plus, I'm a Denver Broncos guy, so I appreciate you calling them out a little bit.
Elway broke my heart in '97. Cost us the. Or I guess it would have been 97. Their first Super Bowl, his first Super Bowl. They beat us in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I'm happy about it, but that's okay. That's okay. We won't.
It's a long time ago. I forgive him.
But I think that's right, though, and I think you bring up an interesting point too of like the team celebrating with each other of like, oh, Rod, look at that block, or whoever it is, right? Whatever team, it's like, look what you did, man. Love that, because people want to repeat that sort of stuff.
You inspire others, right?
Yes.
It's something as simple as when in Atlanta with Jerry Glanville, my rookie year. After it took us a while to get it when we started off 0-5, so I didn't know how fun it could be with Jerry until we actually started winning some games. Deion Sanders came back from baseball, and we went on to win like 6 or 7 games and put ourselves back in the playoff hunt. But when we won games, like the following Saturday, for example, before the special teams meeting, the special teams coach at that time was Bobby April, but we'd have fun. We'd have a little 10-minute video production where they'd hand out prizes and stuff for the week before, showing game film. And, hey, Jeff Donaldson, it's about time you made a tackle on kickoff team, so here's a new watch. He'd have it all scripted out. And,
yes.
Norm Johnson was a kicker. He had a series of, he had like 30 kicks in a row he had made or something. So, Bobby would throw out rolls of ones to all the guys that were on the field goal team for every extra kick he made. The next week, now you had 28, boom, now you're getting 29 because he made another one, So that was, that kind of stuff, right? Or the big hit of the week would get a giant Hershey bar. Obviously, everybody in that locker room could afford a giant Hershey bar, but it meant something when you actually got the giant Hershey bar, right? So it was cool. We had fun with it.
That's really fun. Well, and when you look back at, your playing days at, whatever level, I think, back to that confidence thing, but, a lot of athletes struggle with the self-doubt, with the self-talk going on in the head is not serving them really well, stuff like that. Did you ever experience that? And then, if so, how did you stay focused or refocus yourself in those moments?
Yeah, I really wasn't as cognizant back then about the self-talk component, right? I wish I had been. But there's a lot to that. And I'm a huge proponent of that now. And whatever you do in life, right? But the negative self-doubt talk, just destroys you. You can't fill your mind with negativity and expect to, spew out positivity in your daily life, right? Yeah, but there was a number of times. When you start mentally, I was coming off a knee injury from 97 into the 98 season, and all of a sudden I forgot how to catch a ball, it seemed like, for halfway through camp, right? And it just became kind of a mental thing, like, what the heck, I was attacking the ball rather than just catching the ball. And I remember we were playing the Hall of Fame game, and I dropped the ball in that, and I remember Ray Sherman, the offensive coordinator, were walking off, and he's like, "Man, you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm all right." Just defeated because just mentally, finally I got over that hump. You just, hey, you put in more time on the jugs and, get some more catches. The mind's a powerful thing, and it can be for good or bad. And, there are some things we can do to control that, and garbage in, garbage out, right? So control, you're the filter. You get to be the filter on what you allow to linger in your head. It's okay for, a negative thought to land on your head, but you don't have to allow it to nest in your hair, right? And that's the big thing. And it can be simple as putting it on your mirror, right? Repeating a positive phrase every day to start so that's what's in your head. The old Saturday night, I forget, Stuart Smalley, right? I'm good enough. I'm handsome enough. Doggone it, people like me. It's as simple as that, man. If you say things enough, that's what that's what you become, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot to that.
So true. And it's what you said too. And I hope people picked up on this, that, you're doubting the catching ability for a moment, right? For a period of time. And yeah, we work on the self-talk, and in combination with going to work, catching balls on the jug machine. Like and I don't want to gloss over that sometimes we think like, well, I'll just think good thoughts. It's like, now that in combination with like, go work on the thing, like actually take action upon it. Like that's where the magic is, I think.
Well, yeah, it reminds me of the old adage, pray like God makes a difference, work like you do. Right?
Yes.
Pray to God, but it doesn't mean you don't have to do the work just because you're saying a prayer, right? Yes. Yeah, he might create a miracle, but you got a better chance if you're actually putting in the work yourself too.
So very true. Yeah, my uncle used to tell me like, yeah, keep praying, but God expects you to work, so you better get to work.
That's right. Amen.
So yeah, it's not magic by any means, right?
For sure.
Like, luck favors the prepared. It's like, well, yeah, it's because you were prepared in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I love that quote, man. Luck favors the exceptionally prepared. That's another Gansism used to put a little spin on it. Luck favors the exceptionally prepared mind, right? And that's the thing. If you've envisioned the subconscious mind doesn't know any different from reality versus made up, right? So if you make up every conceivable thing that could happen in a game, and then it happens, well, you've been there before in your mind, in your subconscious mind. You've been there. You've repped it, right? You're going against a tough rushing DN, and all his moves, and you're envisioning yourself making all the counter moves to keep him away from your quarterback. Well, you're not going to see anything different in the game, more than likely. So if you rep that 1,000 times in your mind, that's not the same necessarily, but it's close to the same as doing the physical reps, right? So there's a lot of power in that.
So very true. Am I right that in your, I mean, you were there to block, right? As a tight end, that was your job.
At 39 career catches. Let's not downplay that. Some of those guys get that in a couple games, but
no. Well, I was just going to say 39 receptions, 1 touchdown. Is that right?
1 touchdown. I always laugh at that because people will be like, you only had 1 touchdown in 7 years. And I'll be like, how many did you have? I got 1 more touchdown than most of the people on earth. So that's my claim to fame.
What was that like? Scoring that had to have been like euphoric. Like,
maybe not. To say it was. If I'm being honest, it was my last year in Atlanta. I was playing for a run and shoot tight end run and shoot coach, and I was the only tight end on the roster. I wasn't playing anywhere near like I wanted to play the amount of time. I was super frustrated. I caught it from Bobby Hebert, who's one of my favorite teammates of all time. It was a 3-yarder in New Orleans where Bobby played the bulk of his career, but he finished his career in Atlanta. Yeah. So that was cool. I mean, I was happy for Bobby. It was cool to score it. I think I probably got more joy out of my first preseason game in Atlanta as a rookie coming in, and I got I had 3 or 4 other touchdowns in preseason games, which obviously don't count. But that one against Tampa Bay in my first preseason game at home was pretty memorable because I didn't even have a touchdown in college. We rarely ever threw the ball down on the goal line. George was a pound guy, and the running backs got the bulk of our touchdowns. So that was my first touchdown since high school, right? So it's pretty wild, and played college and pro, and I only had 1 touchdown, but I did still manage a 7-year career. So
that's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. So I asked JJ this question. I love that. You talking with JJ, right? The average NFL career is 2 years, right? And you were able to excel for 7 years and stay in the league. He was able to stay in for 9 years. And I thought Jason Terry Jett, who played 19 years in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
And so you talked about, it's not just getting there, but it's that longevity. It's kind of like staying. It's like once you got to the top of the mountain, the hardest part's to stay at the top of the mountain type quote, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think were your secrets to, being able to have such a long career in the NFL? Like, what'd you do that other people didn't, or opportunities you were given? Like, what was that like for you?
I think the big thing for me was just reliability, right? I mean, there's a lot of talented people in the NFL. And I always say, I wasn't the most talented player at Michigan State. By any means. I could have made a case there was a lot more athletic kids on my high school team than I had. But I was reliable, and I always like to say our best ability is our reliability and our availability, right? You can be a great player, but if you're always dinged and you're never on the field, I get it. Sometimes I got injured. I lost parts of a couple seasons with knee injuries. But if you're available and they know they can count on you, you get a lot better chance of sticking than hey, it's a crapshoot. We got to put Lions in. We're going to roll the dice and hope we can do this, right? Yes. When you prove your reliability, and that's where you see a lot of these backup quarterbacks, right? They play forever because they don't have to play very much, but they know that when they do come in, a Joe Flacco, for example, obviously started a long time, but he's going to play as long as he wants because the guy can still throw the pill, right? And he's reliable. He's and you think of Drew Stanton was an MSU quarterback that played forever in the NFL. A few times he got the chance. Brian Hoyer, another guy from Michigan State that may still be playing. I think he was on a team last year, but they just know they can count on him. If they get in, they can be a stopgap guy and not lose a game, right? They might not go win a game like the top echelon quarterbacks, but they're not going to lose you a game. They're going to make the right smart play. So that's the biggest thing, I think.
Love that. Well, and Flacco, just signed a new 1-year deal with, I can't remember what team, but
right? Yeah.
It's not a bad gig.
Yeah.
Not a bad gig.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you look at, last couple questions for you, but when you look at, athletes right now who maybe have that dream and want to get to the next level, whatever that means, right? And I think sometimes we think like, oh, the NFL, it's like, well, maybe I just want to play varsity, right? Or, on my football team or soccer team or whatever sport you're playing, or I want to have the opportunity to go play in college, whatever that means, right? Whatever level, or maybe you get that opportunity, unexpectedly, like JJ Burden, right? That you all of a sudden you're standing in the NFL having really no dream about it, which is, go listen to that episode, everybody. It's a fascinating story of why he got drafted. But what advice would you give those athletes to, that have that vision, and how do they make it a reality in your mind? So a big thing, I look back and
I mean, find a mentor, right? Find somebody that's doing what you want to do, and don't be shy about talking to them. Most people that are successful, would be honored to, be able to pour back into somebody that's asking them for help, right? And coaches too. I mean, just be honest with yourself and say, "Hey, coach, what do I need to do to get to this level? In your eyes, what do I need to do?" Right? And just be honest with me. Because we can everybody likes to hear flowery things, but we don't always like to hear, "Oh, you're not as good at this, you need to work on this." That's not as fun, right? Everybody likes a pat on the back. We don't always like a kick in the butt, but a lot of times that's what you need. So be open to that constructive criticism and really take a look at it, and make a plan, right? Make a plan, set some goals. It's great to have goals, but if you don't have a plan to reach that goal, it's just a dream, right? So what are your action plans to get to, whether it's, hey, I want to bench 300 by, the fall. All right, well, great. What are your intermediate goals? What are you going to do to hit those intermediate goals? What's the plan, right? And then go work the plan, and don't deviate, from it, right? Just when needed, but commit to it and stick to it. And I think it's just too easy for people to, you see this everyone's gung ho at the turn of the year, and by the end of January, the gyms are empty, right? No one's really committed. Are you interested or are you committed? Right. And there's a big difference.
That's good. And what did you do? I'm curious. Maybe you didn't have these, but I have to ask anyway. I'm sure there were days that you didn't feel like doing it.
Absolutely.
So how did you move past it? Because to your point, we're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it.
That's where the mental toughness comes in, right? I mean, there are days where you just don't feel like doing it, right? But the problem is that's contagious, just like, energy is contagious, positive energy is contagious, right?
Yes.
If you come out there lollygagging and God forbid you're one of the leaders on the team and you're having a day like that and you're not going to overcome it mentally, guess what the guys that are looking up to you are going to be doing, right? They're going to follow suit in a heartbeat. But, if you're all dragging when you walk out there, but all of a sudden you flip the switch when you step between those lines and you're got the energy and you're running to the whistle and you're making plays to the end and you're cheering on the guys that are doing the same thing. That's contagious. And there's a number of times, I mean, in the NFL, a lot of practices got started over, right? You're 20 minutes in and beep, line up for cows. We're starting over because Coach Cowher didn't like what he was seeing, right? Where he'd pull you up, hey guys, this is half-assed, this isn't going to cut it. We got to turn it up. Let's start over. Let's start with inside run period and do it like we're supposed to, right? And so it doesn't take very many times because nobody wants to redo those, right? So if you get that warning, sometimes he give you the warning, hey guys, we're either going to pick it up or we're going to start over. Then usually your leader's going to be like, all right guys, let's go, come on. Because nobody wants to redo inside run period. That's kind of a physical, hat on hat. That's one of your more physical periods in the week when you get into the season. You're not banging a lot once you get into the season, but you are in that because it's hard to really get the timing down and stuff on run plays when you're not going full speed.
I kind of like that. It's like that mental start over. Like this is your warning and start over if you don't feel like it.
It's really, it's got to be a source of pride for you when it comes to the mental. Again, I'll go back. We talked a little bit before I came on the air about Rory winning the Masters, right? That guy was on he was on a roller coaster, right? 4-shot lead, making the turn, looks like he's going great, and all of a sudden he skews one into the drink on 13, and all of a sudden a 3-shot lead, and now now he's tied for the lead, right? And just, he had to overcome so much, and it would have been really easy for him to fold, right? Everybody's calling him a choke coming off last year's U.S. Open. And it would have been really easy to just kind of fade away. And but to be able to just stay in that, man, that's got to be a source of pride for you, right? And it's a muscle you can practice, right? Because we all are going to have times in our life when things aren't going our way. And the more you do it and the more you overcome those times, that muscle gets stronger. And now now it's easier to flip that switch and stay in the zone when things aren't going your way. You see it all the time. NFL it's a long season, right? And you might have a team that, hey, all of a sudden they've lost 3 games in a row and it looks like the wheels are coming off. Pittsburgh Steelers in 2005, I think. They were they were out of the playoffs. They barely made the playoffs as a 6th seed, and then they go on to win 3 straight road games and win the Super Bowl.
Yes.
2005 season, I think. So it's being mentally tough and just hanging in there. Sometimes you just have to hang in there, right? It may not be you're going to win the day, but you're going to hang in there and you're not going to lose the day, right?
Yes.
Just keep grinding. And if you have a bad day, all right, okay, that one's gone, right? One snap and clear. That Frank Gans. One snap and clear. You got to snap it. You got to flush it. Whatever happened, learn from it. But then it's got to be in the past. You can't focus on. You can't go up to the next play thinking about how you screwed that up. Oh, how's that going to look on film? You got to get past it, man, because you're going to screw up the next one. Or you're going to jump off sides because you weren't thinking about what the snap count is, because you're thinking about, and that's something you've got to train yourself to do, man. Because when you get beat bad, or somebody blows you up, because you just got off balance, or whatever, and it's going to look bad. You can't be thinking about that play. You've got to be mentally tough enough to just go forward. And in my business, hey, you have a bad presentation and you feel like you weren't at your best, and you lose the client decides to go elsewhere or decide to work with somebody else. You can feel sorry for yourself, or you can just learn from your mistakes and say, all right, how am I going to learn from this and do better next time? What can I take from this? Right.
So good. One snap and clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the cool thing I remember about the Rory McIlroy thing was there was some quote I saw that he said I had to remind myself that I had played like 13 really good holes. Yeah. And I'm not going to let these couple holes dictate like how well I've been playing. I mean, it's not going to derail me, but he had to remind himself of, but playing lights out. Like,
well, okay. I also read a quote, Scotty Scheffler earlier in the week. They're asking him, I don't know if they asked him what he was thinking, but he goes, every time I go to the first tee, he goes, I think about all the preparation I've put into it. He goes, I remind myself that I'm ready. I'm as prepared as I can be because of the work I've put in, right? That gets back to that. You earn the right to win on the practice field. If you've done the work, it's like we get up to do a presentation, right? If you know the material and you know it like the back of your hand, you're going to knock it out. If you go in and I'm not sure I really I don't have this down. I'm not comfortable. You're going to come across that way, right? You're not going to wow the audience if you didn't put in the time to prep it and rep it and do those mental visualization exercises of living it beforehand, right?
So true.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay. I know we're getting close to time, so I want to ask my last question. But
good, man. I can keep talking.
I know. We'll have to do like a live version of this, and we'll make a couple hours of it and go.
Yeah, no, this is great.
On the golf course or something. You're up to some cool things now, right? You obviously transitioned to the kind of wealth management space, and you got the Lion's Share podcast, all that sort of stuff. But can you give our listeners and people watching just overview of kind of what you do now, your area of focus, and where they can find you?
So I, when I left the NFL unceremoniously with a second blown out knee, I decided to put my business degree to work. I got into retirement planning right out of the gate, and I've built my own company now, Mitch Lyons Wealth. So you can go to mitchlyonswealth.com to learn a little bit more about us. Got a lot of my kids, family business, got a lot of my kids working for me, a couple non-family members as well. But we really just help folks who are in what I call the retirement red zone, using my little football analogy. That loosely defined as 5 to 7 years before retirement and into retirement. The game changes, right? It's not, just accumulation phase. You can't ride the stock market all the way, because I always say the stock market is a great accumulation tool. It's a horrible decumulation tool. If you get to the point you start taking money out and you're not adding in every time it takes a dip, and you're taking money out when it takes a dip, that's where people run into problems. So that's what we really focus on helping people is create income plans so they can enjoy the ride through retirement without having to stare at the gas gauge, right, and hope they don't run out of gas. So and protecting them against, especially now with all the market volatility surrounding the Trump tariffs and all that stuff. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and that's our clients aren't uncertain. They're confident, and I don't have people calling in a panic because they know they're protected. They know their income's set up. I've been involved in a couple of movie projects, documentaries. The Baby Boomer Dilemma I was an executive producer on, and then the Retirement Deception. I was actually one of the featured experts. If people are interested, then go to mitchlyonswealth.com and get a free copy of that film, as well as my book, Retirement of Steel, which I wrote back in 2020. So, and then, just last fall, I started doing the Lion's Share podcast, which has been fun. Had a number of ex-teammates on, and we really talk about anything family, faith, football, finance, or fun. So it's a wide variety of topics, but been fortunate to have, some pretty marquee guests on from my NFL days. Coach Cowher came on, Jerome Bettis, Dermani Dawson, another Hall of Fame center with the Steelers, and some of my old coaches and stuff. So that's been a Bachelor Bob Guinea from The Bachelor. He was an ex-teammate of mine at Michigan State, so it was fun getting caught up with him.
That's awesome.
It's been fun. Just something different, but it's been a fun ride.
That's really cool. Yeah, and we're going to put all the links to, again, website, all that sort of stuff down in the show notes below. So I highly encourage everyone to go check it out. And you talk about even just the wealth side, the wealth. I wouldn't call it preservation, right? But it's the buzzword, wealth preservation, right? Over time, as you start evolving, I don't care where you're at, like starting to learn finance and starting to learn about wealth preservation and growth over time. Like it's a lifelong study that is critical as you grow a family and get into sports or whatever you end up doing. Huge.
It's no different than building the plan to get a college scholarship or make the pros, whatever, right? You got to have a plan in place. And the sooner you have that plan and start executing upon it, you're going to make some adjustments along the way. But the bottom line is have a plan, have some intermediate steps, and have an action plan that it's going to help you get to your goal. So, my website, MitchLyonsWealth.com, or they can even give us a call at 866-85-STEEL, like Steelers, or it's 866-857-8335. I'm happy to chat with anybody that has questions.
Love that. We'll add the numbers too. Mitch, we'll stay on for a minute after we're done, but I can't thank you enough for spending the time with me and getting to hear some of these stories and advice. And I mean, I feel like you need to start like a t-shirt company with all the quotes on them, or like hats or something.
Yeah.
I love it because it's, again, those things, they rattle around our brains. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, it's actually happening. And it's because it starts with a thought and then becomes a reality, right? Based on the work you put in.
Yeah.
And I just can't thank you enough for the time for me and with our audience today. And man, just gold nuggets. So thank you.
Well, I love it. It's all stuff. I'm just, I'd love to say I've authored all these, but it's just stuff that's been poured into me from others. Right. And I think it's important, to give back. And I've had a lot of pretty knowledgeable people that have poured into my life. And if I can pour that back out into somebody else's life and help them, reach a goal, I'm all for it and happy to do it.
That's awesome. Well, please, as I said earlier, everyone go follow Mitch, find him, track him down and start learning from the best of the best, right? And I say on all these episodes, right, if there's one thing you can take from what Mitch laid out today and put it into practice and take action upon it, I'm telling you, it's the small steps. It's the little things done consistently get you where you want to go. You know that. I want to encourage you again to take what Mitch said and implement that today. Please share this episode with your family, friends, coworkers, teammates, whoever, strangers. We don't really care, but let's spread the message around mental toughness, learning from the masters of the game. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.